Beautiful like a fresco and fascinating for its idiosyncrasies, Street Fighter III Third Strike is a melting pot of both popular culture and fighting game design. This is the Annotated Third Strike. Fitting that we kick off the proper series with the Street Fighter III game's main protagonist, Alex. Series producer Tomoshi Sadamoto confirms as such in recent interviews on the Capcom Fighters Network website. Those stories have changed over the years that because New Generation didn't start development as a proper Street Fighter game, as confirmed in Undisputed Street Fighter and in interviews with various staff like Akira Yasuda, series mainstays like Ryu and Ken were only added later into development. We'll touch upon that again in future videos, but this left Alex alone as the sole main character for the new franchise. His appearance, story, moveset, and animation informs much of the game's larger overall design. As Sadamoto came from the background in wrestling video games such as the Saturday Night Slam Masters series, it wasn't too much of a leap to pick out the influences those games had on Alex's visual and gameplay design. Firstly, and to confirm a long-held rumor, Alex was inspired by American wrestling entertainer Terry Hulk Hogan Bollea, as confirmed by both Sadamoto in the CFN interview, as well as former Capcom producer Seth Killian in a video demonstration on gaming website Kotaku for Third Strike Online's re-release for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. His shirt-ripping pre-match intro and special intro against rival character Hugo Andor are direct references to Bollea. The reasoning behind these decisions largely came down to sales and marketing. Per Sadamoto, martial arts were arguably more popular at the time in the US rather than Japan, so the thinking was to make the main character American. North America wasn't originally the main market for the Street Fighter franchise, and this obviously changed with the landmark success of Street Fighter II. Alex, then, was meant to be a protagonist with a simple design while making the rest of the supporting cast flashy, taking inspiration, according to Sadamoto, from 1985 manga Saint Seiya by Masami Kurumada. His physical evolution didn't start this way, though, as sketches that have surfaced in Capcom's Secret Files books indicate that he was originally envisioned as a detective and former pro wrestler, not unlike sister series Final Fight's mainstay Mike Hagar, which Sadamoto confirmed was an early influence, again calling back to the Slam Masters games where Hagar made an appearance. As entries in the fighting game genre rarely have story explicitly told in-game, something that is logically omitted for a game like Third Strike that it was designed for hardcore competitive audiences, players had to glean what they could from win quotes and sparsely animated single-player endings to obtain any insight or closure. For this game specifically, players could choose opponents in single-player mode before a brief dialogue with a sort of scripted sub-boss opponent near the end. The player would then fight the boss character Gil at the end of the game. Third Strike by itself is somewhat unique in the fighting game genre in that it's an epilogue of the events of Street Fighter III's Second Impact, whose story supersedes that of New Generation. This makes it a sequel of a sequel, but still contained in a sort of Street Fighter III pocket universe. Though Capcom had started taking steps for a more unified continuity in the Street Fighter Alpha series, known as Street Fighter Zero in Japan, the Street Fighter III games tend to stand on their own as the end of the franchise timeline as of this recording. Each individual sub-series of games didn't have a lot of staff overlap, though, which could lead to some continuity gaps. When asking representatives from Capcom how multiple narratives reconcile within each other, Undisputed Street Fighter mentions that Udon Entertainment and Street Fighter comic book writer Ken Sui Chong was given very loose ground rules. Quote, "They told me they treated every game as taking place in a parallel timeline," he says. As the main character, the plot of the Street Fighter III games somewhat revolve around Alex, but we still have to seek out official, supplemental material to discern what that is. Japanese arcade game magazine Gamist made official strategy guides for many fighting games during the 90s heyday called MOOCs that elucidated some of these details. Combining the MOOCs with the Street Fighter Eternal Challenge Compendium released for the 15th anniversary of the franchise, we know that Alex lived with his friend and mentor Tom, whom bore a striking resemblance to French film actor Jean Reno, and Tom's daughter Patricia. Prior to the events of New Generation, a mysterious blonde fighter, assumed to be Gil, challenged Tom to a fight and severely hurt him in the process. Consumed with rage, Alex left Tom's gym and entered the third Street Fighter tournament to hunt down and exact revenge on this opponent. His ending in New Generation and Second Impact is a happy one, and curiously leaves him with the qualities of overall franchise protagonist Ryu as he leaves revenge behind him and begins his search for stronger opponents to bring him a sense of purpose and inner strength. His ending in Third Strike brings this full circle as he's in the midst of sparring with the famous series leading man. His win quotes, which will cycle on the right, play nicely with his newfound drive for self-betterment. In Third Strike, these tended to be random, which contrasts with Second Impact that were often context-specific, like defeating a specific opponent or using a certain super art to close out a match. We're also seeing his single-player path on the right along with his sub-boss dialogue with Ryu.
Prepare to strike. Now.
Like most of the cast, Alex's voice actor changed in the transition from Second Impact to Third Strike. Originally, he was given audible life by Michael Summers, known for his role as Bug in the Netflix series Sense8. For this game, he's voiced by character actor Patrick Galligan. Unlike Second Impact, many characters share stages in Third Strike with some minor though noticeable graphical changes between them, depending on which character is the challenger. To lend to his thick Brooklyn accent, Alex Arena went from a Greenwich Village rooftop in the previous games to this abandoned subway station, both of which take place in New York City. It's subtle, but there are layers of parallax scrolling that a spectator will find in the background, and are mostly unnoticeable unless characters super jump. The lighting tells us that Alex's matches take place during the day, and the clock at the top of the screen indicates that we're probably sparring around lunchtime, as is also indicated when fighting against Alex on the opponent's select in the single-player mode. Ken shares this stage, but with different lighting and a change in the clock, meaning it happens later in the evening. The music in each area is composed by Street Fighter III series composer Hideki Okugawa, and is shared among characters with the same arena locations. The name Alex is obviously short for Alexander, which evolved from the Greek Alexandros and can mean protector or defender. That certainly fits his personality when he defends Tom's honor in the story of the game. Perhaps more of note is the name he shares with Alexander III of Macedon, known over time as Alexander the Great. Born in 365 BCE, Alexander was tutored by famous Greek philosopher Aristotle until he turned 16, succeeding his father Philip II as king by 20, and spent most of his remaining years as one of history's great conquerors. Over time, he's become something of a mythic, almost heroic figure that his Wikipedia entry describes as legendary in the mold of Achilles, another mythic Greek figure. I bring this up as great figures and ties to the world's antiquity will be common and recurring themes in the characters we meet in Third Strike, and whether or not Alex the wrestler was indeed named after Alexander the Conqueror, that these avatars are meant to carry the weight of myth. More so than even other games in the Street Fighter franchise, they're totemic. Onto his individual gameplay now, it's important to briefly note a few things about the Street Fighter III game's fluid animation. First, it was recently confirmed through a video documentary with Street Fighter co-creator and former Capcom design team artist Akira Akiman Yasuda that animation and still art for many of the developers' games, including this one, were drawn by hand, scanned, and then pixel corrected. As such, character size, in this case meaning the amount of pixels, their frames of animation, and corresponding detail, was what had taken the most time during Street Fighter III series development. Sadamoto states that they didn't have enough pixel artists to speed things along, which is why whole characters were dropped during the development of the game, including a few that were nearly complete. Luckily, they resurfaced as the Street Fighter III series continued. The Sadamoto interview in CFN mentions that there were some 40 pages of art material for characters taking hits and how they would animate. He and the team wanted something flashier than just normal hit stun, which is the impetus for two of the Street Fighter III series' unique animations. First, a character that is caught in a low sweep while dashing forward will fall into the attack as if tripped while running. Second are spinning hits, where an opponent is knocked so hard they recoil to the point of turning their back. Somewhat novel to Alex are a few moves that can directly take advantage of these animations, which we'll see in a moment. For now, let's briefly outline his normal moves, going from the light moves to the heavy ones, and noting that Alex has a couple of attacks that change depending on his closeness to the opponent. Notable among them, Alex's standing heavy punch will count as an overhead and must be blocked high, like his universal overhead, though the latter can be linked to combos. Pressing toward the opponent and hitting a medium punch will hit a crouching opponent but isn't an overhead because it can be blocked low and is not often used by Alex players. He has a haymaker executed by pressing toward the opponent in hard punch. Most players use this as an anti-air move or in juggle combos. His low heavy punch can hit multiple times depending on the size of the opponent. It can also be used as a launcher in some circumstances. He has a diving attack by jumping and then pressing down in heavy punch. This move can place the opponent in a juggle state when hit air to air, but will leave Alex open to easy counterattacks if blocked on the ground. Alex has two target combos, which are pre-programmed chains of normal moves. Target combos are something of a reworking of chain combos that are found in other Capcom fighting games like the Marvel vs. series and the Darkstalker series, and is a system where nearly all normal attacks can be easily linked together for quick combinations. They appeared in the first Street Fighter Alpha game in 1995, but were not well received by players, making target combos in the Street Fighter III games and beyond something of a compromise. Anyway, Alex can chain his crouching light and medium kick, but the timing is very strict and the actual combo isn't that rewarding from a damage perspective. The other is crouching light kick into heavy kick, but this doesn't even combo correctly. As a grappling pro wrestler, Alex has a nice handful of moves that circumvent the parry system. His normal throw is a body slam. Pressing away in hard punch, though, is a grab that cannot be parried, though it can be blocked, that results in a headbutt that yields a nice chunk of stun. If an opponent were to have their back turned, this move turns into a rear chokehold, and mashing the buttons will cause more damage to occur as well as a high amount of stun, which we can see in the stun meter below a character's health. His special moves are extensions of this. Alex has a command throw on the ground that power bombs, and the strength of which determines the damage inflicted. His spiral DDT hops him forward for a quick takedown. This move cannot be blocked or parried, as it is considered a throw, but it's risky as it can simply be ducked under, and therefore not often used at high level. It's performed with a half circle back and kick buttons. As something of an anti-air move, the air knee smash is performed with a dragon punch motion and kick buttons, and will bring down airborne opponents. This move has an EX variation that can combo after air juggles. On the ground, Alex has two worthwhile striking specials. The first, the flash chop, is performed with a fireball motion and punch buttons. On its own, it does a serviceable amount of damage, and the light version can be used in combos, but the medium and heavy versions will turn an opponent backwards so they can be choked out with a standing headbutt grab. The powerbomb will also turn into a suplex after an opponent is turned around. This makes for one of Alex's best punish combos. The EX version will also hit multiple times and cause a knockdown. The flash chop will also eat projectiles if properly timed. The second is the slash elbow and is considered one of Alex's best moves. Performed with a sonic boom motion and a kick button, it will move him a good distance forward to close the gap between him and an opponent. In doing so on a reversal will often punish careless players. The EX version will hit an extra time and cause a knockdown, but the speed of it is greatly increased, making punishes with this move much more attractive. This move was also new to Second Impact. Lastly, Alex has the two-boot stomp, which is performed with a flash kick motion and a kick button. The strength of the kick button will determine the distance of the leap and will cross up opponents, meaning that they would have to block the opposite direction when overhead. Many players will use this as a sort of 50-50 gimmick for knockdown players, but will leave Alex open to lots of punishment if blocked or parried. The EX version will lock onto an opponent at any distance, which can be useful in some situations like fighting projectile-happy players. Taunting in the Street Fighter III series has much more practical effects than simply pissing off opponents. Each character gains a statistical bonus specific to themselves with taunts. Here, Alex will gain attack power while taunting and can be stacked up to 4 times by either taunting multiple times or holding down the hard punch and hard kick buttons for longer durations. Sadly, most Alex players find that he doesn't have a lot of opportunities in high-level matches to make much use out of the taunt, though. Taunting in fighting games is nearly as old as the genre itself, but we can trace it back to SNK's 1992 Neo Geo game Art of Fighting. It had a practical effect in that game as well, as taunting would drain an opponent's spirit gauge. Taunts in this series started with Second Impact. Like every other member of the cast, the choice of super art can alter how a player contends with opponents. The Hyper Bomb, his first choice, is a throw performed with a 360 rotation and a punch button. Alex can have one stock of this, which gives him 3 EX moves to play with at full meter. Though his most damaging super, the amount of EX moves that can be used versus the time used to build the meter makes this a suboptimal choice for most high-level Alex players. As a grappling move, though, smart play against opponents fishing for lots of parries can still make this a useful choice. This move becomes a series of highly damaging suplexes if an opponent's back is turned. Super R2, the Boomerang Raid, is a combo of 4 hits and a throw to follow up. Depending on the opponent and the screen positioning, the throw at the end may drop, but this super can easily be comboed into from his normal and specials. Alex can have 2 stocks of this super, and a full meter grants him 4 EX moves and change, which makes this the most versatile SA in his arsenal, and thereby the preferred choice of Alex players, even though it's functionally his weakest of the 3 from a raw damage output. Super Art 3 is the Stun Gun Headbutt, which hops Alex upward and a short distance forward to land and grab an opponent for an instant stun. As it cannot be blocked or parried, the obvious reasoning behind the inclusion of such a technique was to play against the various systems that the Street Fighter III games employ. Sadly, though, Alex can be easily popped out of it with a standing jab by most of the cast, and even though the meter is fairly small compared to his other super options, it's considered his weakest of the 3. Fun for catching an unaware opponent for big follow-up damage, but not recommended for people learning the game or playing it competitively. Overall, Alex is considered a mid or low-tier member of the roster. He's fairly mobile for a grappling character, though still noticeably slower on his feet compared to much of the cast. Players that employ the Hyper Bomb super can play aggressively and even somewhat erratically if they can properly plant the super, and can be a decent risk-reward if they want to try using it as a wake-up reversal after being knocked down. Still, the amount of EX that an Alex player has while having an available super art with the Boomerang Raid gives SA2 the edge, and since most of his EX moves are relatively safe, using it just for EX ammo is a viable option. Though he lacks the tools of some of the other characters that are often considered amongst the best in the game, Alex is far from useless, and a strong contingent of players that use him regularly appear, and occasionally even win, high-level Third Strike tournaments. That's it for this episode. Join us next time as we attempt to give a little love for what many consider the worst character of the game. See you then.